the time you get this message, I'll probably already be in St. Louis. So I just wanted to open with a dramatic opening there, like they do in the movies. Welcome to another episode of Ask a Brit. I am in St. Louis right now. I promise I am, but I'll pretend that I'm not, just for the purposes that I've time travelled. I've time travelled to a point in time when I was actually back in my... I'm lying. I pre-recorded this. We don't do it live anymore. In fact, we never have. Yeah, so welcome to another episode of Ask a Brit. This is, of course, the weekly series in which I get to answer your fine questions that you leave in the comments for me throughout the week by using the hashtag #AskABrit. And, of course, if you would like your question to be answered next week in Volume 6, then, of course, by all means, go ahead and ask any question that you like, you know, just so long as it doesn't involve getting my bank details and my mother's maiden name. But because I have to, in a moment, go out and see the Gateway Arch, just to keep up the illusion that I'm in St. Louis, I'm going to get straight into the questions right here, starting with this one from Jamie. Thank you, Jamie, for asking, which state do you plan on visiting next and roughly how soon? Well, of course, I am currently in Missouri. That's a fact. So the next state that I'm going to visit, we haven't really pinned it down yet, but we have been having a few discussions about this. As part of the Finding America series, we're hoping to take ourselves and the series itself to a different state each month right now, but you know, as soon as the fundraising keeps building and we work toward that point to where we can do it every weekend, then we will. But next up, I don't know, it's possibly going to be somewhere fairly near to Chicago, I would have thought. Possibly Iowa. Might say hi to Des Moines, for example, and that's definitely on our radar. But between you and me, Jamie, and everybody else that's watching this video, we're planning a trip to California in November, so we're going to take Amtrak all the way to San Francisco, cutting through a number of states I haven't seen yet, and then we're going to head up north to Seattle and then all the way back. We're not going to do that in a day. This is going to be a long trip. So for that, we will be putting out a funding drive on patreon.com/lostinthepond to try to generate the finances that we're going to need for that trip and to be able to make the documentaries that we're hoping to make about it as part of the Finding America series. He looks terrified.
He's looking out the window. You're keeping him from doing what he wants to do.
Get off me then, you little... Alright, Mark Old Geezer asks, when you were in England, what was your favourite, and he spells favourite with a U, non-alcoholic cold drink? Well, I don't deal in non-alcoholic drinks. I'm kidding, I'm not an alcoholic. But my favourite non-alcoholic cold drink back in the day, ooh, that's a tough one. I no longer drink pop, soda, fizzy drinks, whatever you want to call it, tonic, as they say in, I think, Massachusetts. But I think if I were to think back to when I did, I was rather partial to Tizer, which is not a very nice drink, all truth be told. Made your teeth sticky. Maybe that's why British people have awful teeth.
I don't think so. I think you're just born that way.
Alright, one of our regular questioners, is questioners a word? I suppose it is. Sabina asks, what's your favourite thing in the United Kingdom and in America? Favourite thing? That's broad, isn't it? There are lots of favourite... My favourite thing in the world, and I don't think this is unique to just Britain and America, the most underrated thing in the world is a nice hot bath and a cup of coffee. When we lived in my previous apartment, this is rare to find in the United States, we had a clawfoot tub. Right, and it was delightful just to lay back in that and then think of videos I wanted to make. But anyway, that's one of my favourite things in life. Favourite thing in Britain? Puddles. You get puddles here, but they're not the same. And in America, the favourite thing in America is the diversity of the land. How unbelievable the topography is. And I can't wait to see it with my own eyes and or with a drone. Sabina also asks, do you usually have an issue when you are using British slang words in America? I have had that, yes. I think that when I first moved here, I was using terms like rubbish and, you know, brilliant and all of that. And I don't think it was necessarily an issue. It didn't create so much of a language barrier. I think people could understand through the tone of my voice what I meant, whether I was being really nice and serene or angry and brutal, as was often the case in the early days. I've calmed down since then, but it was frightening for everyone. But the real issue, if you can call it an issue, was that people would giggle, which would undermine the fear factor that I tried to establish. Never have gotten over that. All right, Flying Brian. He asks, the UK seems to have an abundance of wartime curiosities that survive to this day. Pillboxes, indeed, tank traps, RAF and USAAF airfields, and much, much more. Among these are the so-called sound mirrors, or concrete listening ears, along the coast, several of which bizarre structures still exist near Grimsby across the Humber in Kilnsey. They were used to listen for distant aircraft, a sort of precursor to radar. Have you had the privilege of seeing devices along the coast yourself? You know, I did a little look into this before I answered this question, and I'm not familiar with them, but it is very much something I would come to expect. Of that part of the world. We were very protective actually during the war over the East Coast because it was a target for the Germans because of just what we offered from a sort of seaport point of view. My hometown of Grimsby actually is a prime example. It was one of the most targeted fishing ports in the whole of the UK for the Germans. So I can quite imagine how we would have something like that set up. Quite a unique device by the sounds of it. And as for pillboxes, I went on a trip. It was a judo trip when I was like 8. I can't remember where it was, but it was along the east coast up above, and that's when I was first introduced to pillboxes. There's these concrete buildings, little buildings that you can go into, somewhat shelter-like buildings that sort of overlook the coast, and you felt somewhat protected, but then you also understood that if you were bombed, you'd die anyway because the concrete would lacerate your face off. Chris Monaghan, that's a very Irish sounding name, asks, when you go back home to visit, do you now react differently to parts of English life that used to be the norm before you emigrated? Mine is always a death stare when someone has the audacity to expect payment for a coffee refill. Yeah, I can quite understand. The funny thing is, actually, Chris, I've not been back to England since I moved to the US 9 years ago almost. Which is a source of great regret, and I hope to rectify at some point here in the near future. In fact, possibly as part of a Finding England series, although it is a country that I've previously found having lived there, but I'll re-find it, rediscover it. But no, I can quite imagine if I were to go back there now as an expat, there'd be a number of things that I just would not instantly be accustomed to. It's like I said last week, moving to the US is almost like starting again. But I've been starting again now for 9 years, and if I went back there, I feel like it would be another reset button being pushed, and that I would struggle initially, and certainly the free refills on coffees. Bloody hell, I don't know what I'd do without that. America has taught me to be more direct, and I think, you know, I fear to some extent that if I went back home and started talking in that direct manner to people over there, they'd call the police instantly for threatening behaviour. You know, and I wouldn't blame them because, as I said earlier on, you should fear me. I bring the fear factor, as you can. It's the dimples. Okay, next up is Kiena X, who asks, jelly or jam, cookie or biscuit? Well, you know what, I think that just generally speaking, depending on who I'm speaking to, if it's an American, I'll go with the American equivalent of a word. So in this case, I would order a cookie from a cookie shop, but if I was back home, I would say biscuit, hence, you know, my response to the previous question. Though, you know, saying that, I think that now that I've acquired a lot of the vocabulary of America, that's another reason that going back home after all these years, there would be somewhat of an initial struggle. I would be saying, can we take out the trash and things like that, and people would think that I'm becoming Americanized if they didn't know my backstory. And that's fine, of course. I have no shame or problem with that. It's just that from a communications point of view, one might find it rather distressing, especially if one is an elderly gentleman who speaks like this, remembers fondly the British Empire, and is not too keen on Yanks. And then Kiana follows it up with, are you wishing people would ask questions other than, do you plan to go to insert state here? You know what, I understand why you might say that, because it can seem like a repetitive, you know, form of question, but actually I kind of like that people are asking that. Obviously, I am trying to get to all 50 states, so yes, the answer is always going to be yes, I'm coming to your state. But it gives me a chance to expand upon the very reasons that I want to do that for that individual state, and to talk about my sort of love for that state. I do have a genuine understanding and an enthusiasm for every one of the 50 states that goes back to my youth, when I was just fascinated by each of them and took it upon myself to learn even all of the capitals, never mind the states, although, as you may have seen, for those of you who've watched me reciting the 50 state capitals, I did get the Dakota capitals mixed up, so I'm a right pillock. So no, I absolutely don't mind it. You know, keep throwing them at me. You know, ask me, are you going to come to Maryland? And do you like the way I pronounce Maryland? Somebody, and this is going to be a bonus response, and I forgive me, I don't remember who asked it because they didn't use the hashtag, but somebody did ask in the week, are you going to visit Puerto Rico because that's part of the US? Well, you know, technically in many senses of the word, yes it is, and yes I might. All right, next question comes from James Harvey, who says, hi Lawrence, I've enjoyed your Finding America series. Thank you, I have enjoyed making it, and have a question for you. Apparently there's been an 80% increase in American tourists booking to visit the UK this summer as compared to last year. They seem to be taking advantage of the good, for Americans that is, currency exchange rate at the moment. My question is, do you have any plans to visit back home in the near future? I'm thinking of a spin-off series, Finding the UK, episode 1, Grimsby. Oh gosh, I'd love to do it. I'd take this channel all around my country and show you guys just how fine and green it is. Even if there's fly tipping these days, it's still a beautiful country by all accounts. Show you the history and do everything you've ever wanted to see. Lawrence doing a very creepy voice like that. For no, well, I'm scaring myself now. And not just the UK, as I said, I want to take this around the world. I want to take it into the outer solar system. I want to catch up with Voyager 2. You know, I want to go to the far reach. I want to go to a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away and meet Senior Skywalker. He's fictional. Okay, Elizabeth Salvatore. Hello, Elizabeth. A long time subscriber. I'm always really happy to see your comments, and especially since you're, like me, a Doctor Who aficionado. In fact, as you ask, here, I see you are wearing your Doctor Who t-shirt. Not this week, she's referring to last week's video. And she says, or asks, which is your favourite Doctor and favourite companion and favourite/scariest monster? The first two, absolutely easy. Favourite Doctor is David Tennant, number 10. Favourite companion, Donna Noble, and those two were actually a team together, so I think season 4 therefore is possibly my favourite season of anything ever, and that takes into account the fact that MacGyver and Quantum Leap are a thing, so you know, bear that in mind. But my favourite monster from it, I mean, of course I grew up with the classic series, so the Daleks. I was shit scared of the Daleks. I used to hide behind the sofa, which is the cliche, but I actually did it. And the Cybermen. But if you want to talk New Who, it's probably, I think, got to be the Weeping Angels, hasn't it?
Yeah, I'm scared of them.
Don't turn your back on me, because I will. I've got a heart of stone. Catherine Louise asks, hi Lawrence, don't know how much of a moviegoer you are, but wondered what were the best and worst English accents done by an American actor/actress. Okay, so the cliche one here is Dick Van Dyke in Mary Poppins, who is doing a Cockney accent. The thing is about Dick Van Dyke, he's very, very lovable, so you sort of almost forgive it, or at least I did. But one that is unforgivable is Keanu Reeves. Check out on YouTube, Google Keanu Reeves fake British accent or bad British accent. It's monstrously bad. I'm sorry, Keanu. I know that you are a fan of the channel, and I hate to put you down. But like I said, I am a fan of your philanthropic work and things like that. So, I mean, there is that you've got on your side, mate. All right? All right, Mrs. Loon asks, is there anything you don't miss about home? Anything you're actually glad to be rid of, or that you feel has been improved upon in America? In a word, no. No, I'm kidding. There's actually plenty of things that I don't miss about the UK. One of them is that there are CCTV cameras everywhere. It's a little off-putting. Like, I think I've said this before. There's like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 of them, I'm losing count after a while, in London around George Orwell's house. You know, George Orwell, the author of 1984, the book that predicted this dystopic future in which we were under mass surveillance. So there's an irony for you. I don't miss that. I mean, I'm not saying that America is completely devoid of that kind of you know, watchful eye, but it's nowhere near as prevalent as Britain. I think I read at one point that in Britain we have the most, per capita anyway, the most CCTV cameras in the world, and North Korea exists. Okay, we have 3 questions now, and these 3 questions come from Zed Watkins, or is it Z Watkins? Let me know in the comments below which you go by. I'm sure if you're American, it's Z. But Zed Watkins asks, are you related to any British nobility? You know, I don't know of any nobility in my history going back. Do British people, and this is Zed again, asks, do British people like steak and oyster Rockefeller to the extent of us colonials? I don't know, I'm not really familiar with the dish. What is that? Is it good?
So good, but you would hate it because you're a vegetarian.
Yeah, I can't eat it. Maybe British people are aware of this dish. I myself wasn't. And then Zed's final question. Do you think most young Brits know more presidents of the United States than British prime ministers or Tudor/Stuart monarchs? I don't know. Can't speak for the youth of today because I'm not one of them. But I would say in my day we did absolutely know all. I don't know why it's a Yorkshire accent all of a sudden. But back in my day, I must say I think I probably know pound for pound more presidents than I do prime ministers. I think that is somewhat unique. I don't think most British people take it upon themselves to learn that. Some British people take it upon themselves to learn neither. I do find both fascinating. I think history generally is fascinating, and sometimes I like to pinpoint history by looking at the different leaders of each time in a country, because I think that can help you connect the dots to a specific period in that history, to the next period, and to the next period, and to the next period. Okay, and the final question this week comes from Jewful. They ask, how easy is it finding a job without full citizenship? I have a degree in computer engineering, that's Jewful, not me, and want to start work over in the US, but I'm worried about the requirements for work. I think for the most part it's not a concern. I can't speak to the type of jobs you'd be looking for necessarily. I think it's rare, though it does happen, that job descriptions would specify that they need a US citizen. That's usually for jobs that are very particular to, I guess, the kind of work that lends itself to being an American citizen.
Government work.
Government work can do it, although you can absolutely get government jobs as a resident here, a permanent resident. So I don't think it's a huge issue. I think you should be alright, but definitely look out for it. Okay, that's it for this episode of Ask a Brit. I do now have to go and run to try some of St. Louis's famous toasted ravioli. You don't believe me. But until next week, keep those questions coming in. Like I said, use the hashtag #AskABrit, and that way, when I do a search for that hashtag, your question shows up. If you leave that hashtag off, I don't find your question, unfortunately, and I can't include it. And I'd love to include it because you keep asking me some great questions. Anyway, to my American viewers, I hope you're having a great and splendid Memorial Day weekend. Go and have a nice barbecue, unless it's raining, in which case just make yourself a salad and stay indoors with your cats. Okay, until next week, cheerio!